But look, the background to this is it's 19 years since the last time sex education guidance was updated, and the world has changed an awful lot in that time. A lot of that is to do with the internet and all the different pressures and stuff that come with new media. But there's many other changes as well, and I think it's right that we update this and we look at it afresh, and actually we've combined relationships education with sex education, and also bringing in health education as a universal aspect as well, and these things are all closely related. But let me come back to that thing you said about age, because it's really, really important. We are saying that in primary school you should learn about respectful relationships. That actually starts with very basic stuff like being kind and taking turns. When you start to talk about different types of adult relationship, if you like, I mean that has to be done in an age-appropriate way, and it's right that schools make that decision about when is the appropriate point to do that. It's absolutely not about saying this stuff all happens from age 5.
Right, but OK, so when do you think the appropriate age should be there? Because there's obviously been a massive misunderstanding about this, given that the narrative coming out in the last 24 hours is that 5-year-olds will be exposed to this kind of education. Is that not right? Are no 5-year-olds going to be exposed to it? Are some 5-year-olds? Does it depend on the school?
So, Piers, like many things with growing up, there's a gradual introduction to many subjects. And as I say, when we talk about respectful, healthy relationships, that starts with, it starts with our own place in our own family and with our friends at school, and the way to, ways to be nice to each other, ways to be kind, ways to take turns. And then, of course, that evolves into understanding about things like giving permission, giving consent, and how you can withdraw permission and consent, how you can tell people when you're not happy about stuff. That very, very gradually then develops as you go through school, and then when you enter secondary school, then you're talking more about the young person as themselves a potential partner and a potential parent. So it's absolutely not. This is not about just saying, at a certain point you get taught about this type of relationship. It's about gradually introducing children to subjects and making sure they can keep themselves safe, including keeping themselves safe online, and making sure they're prepared for the modern world. But do you think that there is merit from a government perspective to be even talking to young children, 5, 6, 7, whatever age it may be, very young kids, about things like transgenderism, for example? Do you think that they should even have the conversation at all? No, I think at a young age, what you're talking about is about having respect for all kinds of people, understanding there's difference in the world, and thinking that is a good thing. You have to have respect and understanding for all the different types of families, for example, that you may come into contact with. And that point may be different in different schools, in different places, with different cohorts of children. And, teachers are the best placed, alongside parents. Parents are, of course, the primary teachers, as it were, of their children. But teachers play a really important part in that as well. And they are best placed to know when is the appropriate time.
But what I'm not getting from you is an age limit. And surely the government's responsibility shouldn't be just to leave it completely arbitrary to any school in the country to determine what age they do this.
Well, and I wonder,
surely you should be giving some guidance as to what age the conversation begins about this kind of issue.
Because, for instance, Ms. Hinds, if I can just add to Piers' question, if you leave it up to teachers, because I thought that this was compulsory or mandatory, this education now in primary schools, but if you leave it up to individual head teachers, you'll get situations like that of Andrew Moffat, the assistant head teacher of this primary school in Birmingham, who's now receiving death threats for teaching sex education to his primary school pupils. So either it should be that the government decides what's taught, or you have to, have some guidelines so that parents realise that it's up to head teachers and it's out of the parents' hands.
So, Susanna, the thing you said about being mandatory is correct. It is mandatory, will be mandatory to have relationships education in primary school, and in secondary school to have relationships and sex education, and also health education added to that in both phases, both primary and secondary. But we have always had in this country, flexibility for schools in how they approach these what can be sensitive sensitive subjects. And Piers kept saying, you know, what is the moment when you teach this? As if this is sort of like something where you just turn over the page and here's a new subject. That is not the way these sensitive subjects, and actually for young people growing up, quite difficult subjects sometimes. It's not how they should be treated. It is about gradually, you know, development of self, about self-awareness, about understanding the world around us. And yes, we do say that in primary school, all children should learn to respect all different types of family that they may come into contact with. But that's not the same as saying that, you know, you should be having those more difficult conversations, those more complex subjects, which are rightly likely to come later on.
But you see, I would say, as someone who's had 4 kids of 5 years old, I just can't imagine any kind of conversation of this nature with a 5-year-old that would make any real sense to them, other than to cause them a lot of confusion, perhaps a lot of angst or whatever. And I think that's what's triggered people, parents, certainly, their concern about this, is it's not about having any bigoted feelings towards any of these issues, or preventing kids as they get to the right age from being taught about them properly and being, you know, exploring them and so on. It's about very young children who perhaps should just be protected from any of this kind of conversation, being bombarded with this kind of educational matter at such a young age. That's the concern. It's not about whether parents feel, you know, negatively towards any of the particular groups. It's not about bigotry. It's about protection of kids when they're very young, isn't it?
I think, Piers, you and I are more on the same page than you may realise. I can't match your 4 children. I've had 3 who've all been aged 5, and of course that's a very sensitive age. And nobody is talking about suggesting that there should be, you know, these difficult conversations with children that age. But relationships in a broader sense, about friendships and interactions and how you interact with other children, with adults, with family and so on, actually that is important from a very young age. You know, how we interact with others in the playground. And then increasingly, of course, children are doing stuff online, you know, and they've got to know about making sure they keep safe and all that kind of stuff. And that is important as we grow up in today's world.
OK. Ms Hinds, I want to ask you a question which may sound slightly facetious but is utterly serious, and that is Brexit going to happen?
Yes, it is.
Is it going to happen on 29th of March?
Yes, it is.
You're absolutely 100% confident about that?
Yes, I am. So myself and my colleagues in government are working very hard, no one harder, of course, than the Prime Minister, working extremely hard to make sure we can get that deal over the line. There is a very good deal on the table. There are some legitimate concerns about the backstop in terms of the timing and so on, and it's important to get those resolved. But yes, that is what we're doing.
OK.
So when we read very well-sourced stories in the Telegraph and other papers today saying that there's going to be a two-month delay and an extension of Article 50 by the Prime Minister, that's untrue, is it?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, yes, we're working towards leaving on the 29th of March. As I say, you know, there are these things to sort out, and you will know and you'll recall over the years, negotiations with the European Union do have a tendency to go to the wire, and that can be a very uncomfortable position to be in. But there is a really good deal on the table, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. It's a good balanced deal that the Prime Minister has negotiated. There is this particular issue around the timing and so on of the backstop that does need to be resolved, but it's a good deal which works for people's jobs and livelihoods, and we need to get it over the line.
OK, and that, unfortunately, for the Prime Minister and your government was rejected by a historic, spectacular amount last time it went to Parliament. So what's changed about it, which means that it's going to get over the line this time? And if it doesn't succeed, do we go to a position where we have no deal? And if you're confident that Brexit's going to happen, is it a Brexit with no deal at all?
Yes, there was a lot of questions in that question, but yes, you're quite right.
Well,
it was heavily.
What's changed, and do we have no deal?
So you're right. It was defeated heavily in Parliament. There's no getting away from that. There's no sugarcoating it. But there was also the so-called Brady Amendment, which set out that Parliament's big issue was around the backstop, and that's why so much focus has been on the backstop. Now, the backstop itself, I mean, you can take a view either way on it. Actually, there's some very positive things about the backstop, but it's uncomfortable to be in something which would stop you, enacting trade deals without knowing that there's a finite time limit to that, a point where you would be out of it. So it's right that the focus is on resolving those serious concerns, and that's what the PM's been doing.
Matthew Parris, who was a former Conservative Member of Parliament and a very respected journalist, said in the Times on Saturday, in one of the worst takedowns of a Prime Minister I can ever remember, that Theresa May was effectively completely useless, and that as long as she stays in power, we're all basically doomed. What was your reaction to that piece?
Well, it won't surprise you, Piers, I think, dear. I don't agree with Matthew about that. I think Matthew, he's a very sharp commentator, but on this occasion, I think he's got it wrong. I think, the drive, the determination, the tenacity that the Prime Minister has shown has been second to none through this process. We are in a difficult phase, but we can get there, and we need to get there.